Kings.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good deal. So it does cover a significant amount of time. Pretty much if you add Samuel, of course, you've got the time of the kings all together there. Chronicles, you might remember we talked about it last week. Chronicles addresses mostly Judah and mostly from the perspective of priests. Kings addresses both kingdoms, the northern kingdom and Judah, and it's addressed mostly from the perspective of the prophets. So that's helpful. That's where you have Elijah and Elisha and a number of the prophets and the kings and their interrelation as God sends his messengers to give warning to the kingdoms and to these different kings in regard of judgment to come. And of course, that's what unfolds in these books. So at chapter 17, you have the Sennacherib 22 version. Just a couple of dates there. You know, we got 931, the building of the temple, 931 Solomon, and building of the temple. Then you've got 931, the splitting of the kingdoms, the northern kingdoms carrying on for some 200 years, right at 200 years, and then they're exiled, exactly as Leviticus chapter 26 says that they would be, and Deuteronomy chapter 30, if they broke covenant. So it's very clear in scriptures that God was faithful and Israel was not in regard to their conditional aspects of the covenant as the children of Abraham, right? So, okay, then there's these key verses. So the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed, this is from chapter 17, and removed them from his sight. None was left except the tribe of Judah. And Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the customs which Israel had introduced. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel, afflicted them, and gave them into the hand of plunderers, until he had cast them out of his sight. When he had torn Israel from the house of David, they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. Then Jeroboam drove Israel away from following the Lord and made them commit a great sin. And the sons of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel from his sight, as he spoke through all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was carried away into exile from their own land to Assyria until this day. So that's the commentary from the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, and it's included there in chapter 17. And it's key because all of it's about keeping covenant. This king did evil in the sight of the Lord. He didn't keep covenant. This king did that what was right in the sight of the Lord after his father David. He kept covenant. That's basically, and it's over and over. It's repetitive throughout the 200, what I think was it, 201 or 7 years the northern tribes existed, and the 375, another 150 years for the southern tribe of Judah. So, key verse for Judah is found in 2 Kings 23. As you draw near the end of the book, the Lord said, I will remove Judah also from my sight, as I have removed Israel, and will cast off Jerusalem, this city which I have chosen, and the temple which I said my name shall be there. So, all of Israel experienced the fifth cycle of discipline from Leviticus chapter 26. First cycle of discipline, God brought discipline on them. They continued in their sin. God brought a second cycle of discipline, and there's 5 of them, and that fifth one says, I'll remove you from the promised land. And it's all covenant language and has to do with their relationship with the Lord. The theme of the book is God is faithful to keep covenant, and Israel is not faithful. It's pretty simple, isn't it? But it's repetitively made the point over and over again. And I would relate it back to the things that we've been talking about in regard to the mandates and covenants. You know, when God said after the flood there with Noah, I see that man's heart is evil from its youth, and it was just broken. And you go back to that Adamic mandate where it was to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. But to Noah and to his sons, God didn't say subdue the earth and have dominion over it because of that very reason. And what we find in God's plan unfolding through Abraham, these covenants and his plan as it's unfolding, we find that man is consistently failing, and God's grace is the only thing that holds things together, period. It's never on the basis of man's goodness or man's successes or man's works or they're keeping the law for Israel or any of those things. They always fail. And we can carry that further to say we always fail, right? Because the church hasn't done any better than Israel did under the new covenant. You know, we're just as bad off. And yet, well, we're not as bad off because we do have that wonderful relationship and we do have the grace supplied in the new covenant. So we can't say we're as bad off. But on the side in regard to the successes of man, it's always the same. Man can never be successful. We can't reform ourselves. We can't change the fact that our hearts are evil from their youth. Our flesh is that way, and yet in the new birth, God has given us a new spirit and a new heart, whereby we desire something different, and we can know that grace that's been given in Jesus Christ and know His blessing and forgiveness that has been abundantly supplied in the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. So that's something that Israel didn't have. They didn't have the new covenant and didn't have the benefits that we have of the indwelling Spirit and the abundant and lavish grace and supply of our Lord Jesus Christ. So, okay, facts of the book. The less stable northern kingdom, Israel, only existed as an independent nation for 209 years. All of the kings were characterized as evil because they continued the golden calf cult of Jeroboam. Now, that golden calf keeps showing up, doesn't he? I mean, at Mount Sinai, when Moses was on the mountain and receiving the Ten Commandments, Israel was down making a golden calf. And, you know, Aaron threw it in the fire and it popped out of there, and you remember that scene. But with Jeroboam as well, when they split the kingdoms and Jeroboam in his paranoia and fearfulness didn't want the 10 northern tribes going back to Jerusalem for those annual feasts, and so he built these golden calves to be worshipped. It is significant to make the point that in the golden calf worship, that was a form of Yahweh worship, and really messed up form of it, but it nonetheless was a form of Yahweh worship, a very twisted thing. It wasn't Baal worship, which came in later. The average reign was 10 years for all of these kings, and many of them were a lot less. There were 9 different ruling families. The less stable northern kingdom, Israel, is that charisma was as important as ancestry to take the throne. So these different charismatic type leaders would rise up and they would assassinate the king and take over, and people would follow them. But sometimes they would banter back and forth, and one would kill the king, and someone else would come in and kill them. And so if you read 2 Kings and finished up this week, and you saw that, especially at the end, it was like they were just battling back and forth, and it's very, very unstable. The fate of the kings was tragic. 7 kings were assassinated. 1 king committed suicide. 1 king was stricken by God. 1 king was taken to Assyria. So, pretty tragic heritage and history there, isn't it? Okay, then the more stable southern kingdom, Judah, existed a century and a half longer than the northern kingdom. That's 345 years. It's a lot different from 209. 10 years each. Who's the one queen? Who is the one queen for the southern? Athaliah? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I can say the names really bad.
Hey, you made it. Yeah, Athaliah. Glad you made it. Yeah, give them a spot there. Come on in. And, well, you can eat, but just don't smack too much. So we're.
Enough to share?
No problem. Okay, so we're looking at the southern tribes at this point, because it moves back and forth between the northern tribes and the southern tribes. The southern tribes existed for 345 years, as opposed to the 209 years the northern tribes existed. And the reign of Judah's 19 kings and 1 queen averaged more than 17 years. And who was the one queen?
Athaliah.
Yeah, I always say Athaliah, but it's anybody's guess how Hebrew should be pronounced in English. So you just give it your best shot, and that's good enough. So who was this woman?
Jezebel's sister?
Daughter. Yes, Jezebel's daughter. Right. Okay. So not a nice lady. Really a bad person. Okay. 3, the Davidic family was the only dynasty. Queen Athaliah's evil reign was the only interruption of the Davidic family line. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, because of the Davidic covenant of God's promise to David, and yet this very incredible spiritual warfare. We can look at these things through Scripture, but you had, you go back, you had Pharaoh killing all the babies, you had Athaliah killing the babies, you had Herod killing the babies, you have the Holocaust even after these things. The history of Israel and the spiritual nature of these terrible, horrible, tragic events and attempted genocides can only be described diabolically as demonic. It's just Satan's attempt to thwart the plan of God. So we look at, we've got the Abrahamic covenant and God's plan to bless Abraham and through him for all the nations to be blessed. And you have these constant assaults. And, this scenario with Jezebel, the infiltration of Baal worship, Athaliah, the infiltration of Baal worship in the southern kingdom as well, and all of the nature of the spiritual and genocidal type of things that were taking place it's just spiritual warfare. That's all that you can conclude on that. Point 4, Judah also had tragic fates for the kings. 5 kings were assassinated, 2 kings were stricken by God, 3 kings were exiled to foreign lands. So there's tragic enough as is. You did have some good kings, though. 8 of Judah's rulers were good because they followed the example of David and Yahweh. What's the the pattern. What does the scripture say? Yeah, and what does that mean? How did they say it?
Did as their fathers.
The father David.
The father David
Yeah.
did.
They did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, or did that which is good in the Lord's sight, as their father David. So good means they kept covenant. So you got Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, and Amaziah, Azariah, Jotham, Hezekiah, and Josiah. 8 of Judah's rulers were good because they followed the example of David and obeyed Yahweh. Those 8. Okay? Purposes for the books of the Kings: complete the written history of the Hebrew kingship as a sequel to the books of Samuel. Show the repeated divine reasons for the fall of the Jewish nation and and Israel as well. To relate the history of Hebrew united and divided monarchies in their covenant failure. And then D, legitimize the Davidic dynasty through the agency of the prophetic office, because the kingship's covenant, previously announced by Nathan, sanctioned the tribe of Judah and the family of David as rightful heirs to the Hebrew throne. And then to warn the kings and the people of the consequences of covenant disobedience. Themes stated over and over. Demonstrate that Messiah was yet to come. 2 Samuel had not yet arrived. 2 Samuel 7 had not yet arrived, since none of the kings who followed David were greater than David. Okay, so who are we waiting for? Mm-hmm. Our Lord Jesus, yes. And then finally there, provide hope for Israel that God would yet fulfill his covenant obligations. So how's it going to happen? God's going to do it. Is Israel going to do it? No. Is Israel going to be successful? No. and that's the story. That's the tragic story of mankind. The creature needs the Creator. Man needs God. We're dependent upon God. We're subservient to God. We're to submit to God. We're to bow our knee to our God. God is the one that is able. Man autonomous will always fail. He'll always lose. He'll never succeed. He'll never subdue the earth. He'll never have dominion over it. He'll never do what's right. There's none that will do what's good. Not one. Not a single one. And there's not someone to save us. There's not a king. There's not a government. There's not a religion. There's not anything outside of our God and Creator that is any help to us at all. We must learn that autonomy is death, separation from our Creator. And here's my view of it: is ultimately hell is God giving autonomous man exactly what autonomous man wants. Okay, go create your own world. Have at it, because we don't have anything that God hasn't given to us. And autonomous man is hopeless and worthless. He can't create anything. He can't do anything apart from his Creator. And that's the tragic truth of the problem of evil, of the failure of man, of original sin, of all of what we face. Okay, so First and Second Kings. First Kings begins with David, ends with Second Kings ends with the king of Babylon. First Kings opens with Solomon's glory. Second Kings closes with Jehoiachin's shame. First Kings reigns with the blessing of obedience. Second Kings ends with the curse of disobedience. First Kings opens with building of the temple. Second Kings closes with the burning of the temple. First Kings traces the progress of apostasy. Second Kings describes the consequences of apostasy. First Kings shows how kings fail to rule God's people. Second Kings depicts consequences of that failure. First Kings introduces the prophet Elijah. Second Kings introduces the prophet Elisha. First Kings emphasizes the patience of the Lord. Second Kings confirms the Lord's sure punishment of sin. There's a lot of things in there. If we just look for them, hopefully these notes will be helpful to you. When you get down to reading or studying these books, to keep those major things in place is very, very helpful to you. So let's look then just a little bit. We've got some good time. Good. I was hoping that we would be able to do this. This is the lineage of Ahab, okay? Ahab and Jezebel, if you look on the left there, I'm sorry about that bleeding through, but I'll have to redo that. But it still serves its purpose. Ahab and Jezebel, what happened? How did Ahab come to have such a treasure, this woman Jezebel? How did that happen?
Political reasons?
It was a political move, yes. And what was that political move? It's good to remember some of these things. So.
To align Tyre and Sidon?
Yes, Tyre and Sidon were Phoenicians, and if you know anything about that kind of history, the Phoenicians were merchants. They traveled all over the Mediterranean. They brought trade. They were rich and powerful. And so for the 10 northern tribes, for Israel to make an alliance with them was a great political move. It was bound to prosper the nation. And so Omri, Ahab's father, says, well, let's make this alliance, and I'll marry my son to this wonderful princess Jezebel, and boy, we'll prosper. We're going to do good. Okay? So, and they did. They prospered financially and well-to-do, but Jezebel brings in Baal worship. Not just Baal worship, because Baal is kind of a general. There's many forms of Baal, but Baal McCourt from the Tyre and Sidon and from the Phoenician was particularly vile. It was even worse than the Canaanite Baal worship. Okay? So Jezebel brings them in, and all kinds of bad things happen. God raises up Elijah. God warns King Ahab. He warns the 10 northern tribes, and Elijah does all of these miracles and all these incredible things in God's mercy for Israel. And so Ahab dies. Okay. How does Ahab die? Because I'm gonna show you the places here in just a moment. We'll look at it on the map a bit. Okay.
He gets shot by an arrow, random arrow.
Yeah, and where was he at?
Somewhere in Israel.
Yeah, he was on the other side of the Jordan over there fighting the Arameans in Ramoth Gilead. Did you say Ramoth Gilead? Yeah, the Arameans. He was fighting the Arameans, and he was up there, and Jehoshaphat over here. Jehoshaphat is a good king, remember? Okay. Jehoshaphat makes an alliance with Ahab, and they go up and fight the Arameans. And he joins in with Ahab, and they call Elijah and get the word. And Elijah says, Ahab, it's over for you. Okay. So Ahab hides. He doesn't dress as a king going into battle, but he lets Jehoshaphat, his good friend. And so Jehoshaphat's riding around on this chariot, and everybody's after him. They're after trying to kill Ahab, but Ahab is hidden, and they don't know who he is. But Jehoshaphat looks like Ahab, and so they go after him, and they've in a moment realized that, hey, this is not Ahab. So they leave off. Someone randomly pulls the bow and lets the arrow go, and it strikes Ahab in the right place in the armor to kill him dead. Okay, so he's mortally wounded. He's bleeding in his chariot, and they travel from Ramoth Gilead. And I'm going to show you where Ramoth Gilead is and where he goes home to and what happens there. So we'll go back to that. But his son Ahaziah reigns after that. What happens to Ahaziah? Ahaziah is in Samaria. So Ahab is taken back. His chariot is taken back to the city, the capital city, Samaria. They wash out his blood, and dogs lick it up, and where the harlots bathe, just as the prophet predicted would happen.
He's one that fell out the window or the lattice or something.
Yes.
And then he consulted prophets other than God, so then God
Prophets
said
of
he'll
Baal.
die 'cause you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what happened to Ahaziah. Good. That's good memory. Way to go. So Ahaziah, he falls through the lattice and he dies. God kills him. You know, God takes him out. But when he's injured, rather than seeking the Lord and seeking the prophets, he goes to the prophets of Baal. So he goes down to Ekron from Samaria, which is down south, and there Elijah meets them, and he says, because you sought out this, then you're going to die. Okay, and now was it Ahaziah? I can't remember, that sent the 50 by 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this was to Elijah. So Elisha's taken over by this time. I'm not going to try to cover the prophet so much, but that's a great study in itself.
Is there any significance to that they do it in threes, or is there anything that we're supposed to discern from that, or?
I think it's just God showing judgment and showing his superiority and authority over the prophets of Baal. Of course, Elisha's there, and he says, I'm trying to find which chapter that is in. Is it in chapter 1 of? Yeah, it is. Okay, so yeah, it's in chapter 1. He falls through the lattice. He sends the men down to Ekron, and Elisha meets them and sends them back. Says, "You're going to die." And so Ahaziah, in his rebellion, sends 50 men down, and they say, "Elisha, O man of God, the king says, come down." And he says, Elijah answered, said, "The captain of 50, if I'm a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. It happens 3 times. And then, but that third time, the captain of 50, he pleads for his life and for the life of his men, and he preserves them. And so, long story short, because you've sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, it is because there is no God in Israel to inquire of his word. Therefore you shall not come down from your bed where you have gone up, but shall surely die. So Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken. Still Elijah here. And because he had no son, Jehoram became king in his place in the 2nd year, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. It gets confusing there now. Because why? Because here's your chart. You didn't have your chart. This is Ahab's son, and not Ahaziah's son, because he had no son. But Ahab's second son, Jehoram, takes over king. But you can't confuse him with Jehoram, king of Judah, over here, because he's the son of Jehoshaphat that's married to Athaliah. So confusing? Yeah. It's confusing. The chart really helps, though. Okay? So, but it says it there. It says Jehoram became king in his place, and because he had no son, so Ahaziah had no son, right here. So Ahab has a second son, Jehoram, that becomes king. Over here, Jehoshaphat had a son named Jehoram that marries Athaliah. And it shows how their alliance, kind of the closeness that they came to, I don't know if Ahab named his son after Jehoram or one or the other or both, or what the deal was. It doesn't say, but So it says Jehoram became king in his place in the second year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. So see, it describes it here. You just have to pay attention to what's taking place, and that's what happens. Okay, and then this situation with Jehoram. What happens with Jehoram? First of all, he has one battle, and they win the battle. But then they have another battle with in Elisha's ministry. There's a lot of things that happens with Elisha's ministry there. But Jehoram ends up in this battle with Syria, or with the Arameans again. And he gets wounded, doesn't he? And he goes home to if you go to chapter 6, the king of Aram was, and this is verse 8, the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, such and such a place. Okay, that's a little short. Damascus. If you go to chapter 8 and verse 16. Now in the 5th year of Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, being then king of Judah, Jehoram his son, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, became king. Okay. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem, and he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab became his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. So in his days, Edom revolted, and all of these things happened, and Joram crossed over to Zair and his chariots with him. And it came about that he arose by night and struck the Edomites and surrounded him and the captains of the chariots, but his army fled to their tents. So Edom revolted against them to that day. And the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Joram slept with his fathers and was buried in his fathers in the city of David. So this guy dies, and so their son Ahaziah becomes king at that point. Okay, so Ahaziah was 22 years old. He's the son of Jezebel, and this guy's rotten. He did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. So did this guy. Again, the influence of mamas. Again, there's a huge commentary about the influence of mamas here. I'm about to run out of time here. But, so, anyway, Ahaziah if you look at chapter 8, in the 12th year of Jehoram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. So this guy's reigning over here, and then Ahaziah takes reign because his daddy dies. Okay? And Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king and reigned 1 year, only 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. And he walked in the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab had done, because he was at the house, son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Verse 28 of chapter 8, then he went with Jehoram, the son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth-Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Jehoram. Okay? So he returned to be healed in Jezreel. Okay? He goes back to this fortified city in Jezreel to be healed of the wounds the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramah when he fought against Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Jehoram. So this guy here goes to Jezreel to see Jehoram. Okay? And what happens? What happens at that point? Jehu. Jehu comes on the scene. Jehu comes back from Ramoth-Gilead, and they look out, And Jehoram says, well, who is that? You know, and he sends out these messengers. And finally he goes out and Jehu kills them. And he kills, not only kills him, but he kills Ahaziah, which causes this really huge conflict because Athaliah kills all of the line of David. Everything except this one little boy here who's a baby. This is an infant. And this wife of this high priest hides him. And that's all of the line of David that made it through this period of time. So although Jehoshaphat was a good king that kept covenant, Jehoshaphat caused an absolute disaster for Judah. So it's disastrous what he did in that alliance, in that area of disobedience. Yes?
So I had a hard time in chapter 8 because I'm pretty sure my Bible used two names for the same guy.
Yes.
It says Jehoram
Mhm.
for both of the Jehorams.
Mm-hmm.
It also says Joram, Joram.
Yes.
And so in verse 16 you were saying, in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab,
Mm-hmm.
that Jehoram.
Different spelling.
Right.
Yeah.
Jehoshaphat had a making of Judah. Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, began to reign. And then it's telling a story, and then all of a sudden it's still talking about Jehoram in Judah, but it starts saying Joram, and it's still the same guy. Because at the end it says Joram, all of his stuff is written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah.
Yeah. Okay. Think of it this way. Sometimes, like when I go to the doctor's office, I'm called James, but usually I'm called Jim.
Okay, so
Yeah,
but
they
they're
did the
both
same.
on the same nickname.
They did the same kind of things. So, and you'll find that a lot of times in the scripture, you know, there's different spellings for their names, and you know, it's reasonable that they have names just like we have names, that there are different spellings, different forms of these different names. Okay, so it does get confusing though. You got to pay attention in your reading, right? So that means that we do need to be students of the Word. You know, it's not just slop through, and we have to read carefully and pull some of these things together. But there's great benefit. Now, okay, and this is, yes?
In your last slide, where does Jehu fit into, how does he relate to everyone else?
He doesn't.
Because
He's a king. He's a general.
in verse 2 of chapter 9 says he's the son of Jehoshaphat, but not that Jehoshaphat.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to be really confused.
Yeah. And again, yeah.
Yeah. Son of Nimshi.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if Guzman was here, we'd have two Steves in the room. You know. So
No, it's
same thing. Yeah. So, but it does get confusing. Now here we have. Let's see if I can get my pointer. Here's Ramoth Gilead over here. Damascus and the Arameans are up this way. They come down. There's a battle here at Ramoth Gilead. Okay. First, it's Ahab. He gets struck. Okay, so Ahab comes through this valley of Jezreel. He comes through here and goes to the city of Samaria, his capital city. There he dies, and they wash his blood out, and he's dead. Okay, so some years later, Ahaziah goes up, and he's fighting a battle here, and he gets wounded. So he goes back to this city of Jezreel, which is right here on the, I'm going to show you a larger map, but this is the area that's taking place in. Okay, cross over the Jordan River here into this valley of Megiddo, this huge area, huge and beautiful valley. And there's a fortified city there, Jezreel, that Ahab, the king's built. And then there's the capital city of Samaria over here. And so these events are taking place up here. Okay, let's see. All right, here's a better map. Can you see that? Can you see that a little bit? This is Ramoth Gilead. There's my pointer, there we go. Ramoth Gilead right here. Got it? Okay, so he gets wounded. Here's the Valley of Jezreel. This is actually called the Valley of Herod. It's like the shaft of an arrow, and it comes into this huge kind of arrowhead-looking area known as the Valley of Megiddo and Valley of Jezreel. And right here is this city of Jezreel. Okay? And then there's 3 exits through this little mountainous range here, but the usual one is through here, and you come down and you go to the capital city of Samaria. Okay? So, here's a bigger picture of the Valley of Jezreel. This is called the Valley of Megiddo that you're very familiar with. Here's one, what is it called, Tommy, the point at the end, the back of the arrowhead. So not the point. Yeah, these 2 points here are like that's like part of your arrowhead. Knock. What is it? A knock. It's called a knock. Okay, so this is a knock, and here's a knock down here, and this is the shaft. This Herod Valley is the shaft. Well, here's Jezreel. See, over here is Ramoth Gilead. Jezreel. You go, now here's your passes. This is the Yokneam Pass, mountain pass, and here's what's called the Aruna mountain pass, or the Megiddo Pass, because Megiddo, the fortified city, is here. Yokneam, the fortified city, is here over this pass. It protects these routes, and these are trade routes and routes for armies when they come. Then there's one down here behind Jezreel that comes through this valley and out this way to Samaria. Isn't that cool? Okay, so that's your setup, and here's now. Okay, I wanted to show you. Okay, we're gonna take the view here of being out here in the sea and looking back this way toward Jezreel. Okay, in this next slide. Okay, so here we're looking from the Mediterranean Sea, and there's Jezreel right there. Okay, Ramoth Gilead is over here up in this area. They come down and what's his name? Ahaziah. Is that correct? Yeah, Ahaziah is recovering, and Jehoram is coming. No, I'm getting names mixed up.
Other way around.
The other way around. Jehoram is recovering, and Ahaziah comes. Yes. Okay. So this is the city, and see, here's the little valley entrance. It goes back to the capital city of Samaria. No, that's the Jordan Valley. This is where it goes back to the capital city of Samaria. And so he's recovering here, and King Ahaziah comes down to check on him. And Jehu comes up this valley here, riding his chariot. He drives like Jehu. That's where that. So if you've ever been told that you drive like Jehu, that's where that comes from. I have been.
Would you say I have?
I have, yes. So they're here, and they see this chariot coming up, and this army, this bunch of Jehu, because Elisha has told him that he's to wipe out the lineage of Jezebel. Okay, so here's a view from Jezreel. Okay, this is looking across that knock to the other side to Mount Moriah. Here's where a lot of things happened. The Midianite tribe was here when Gideon fought them. Gideon was down here in this direction at the spring, and they came up and fought the Midianites that were here near right off of the hill of the Mount Moriah. And going back, this is cool stuff, see? Yeah, so Jezreel's here, and this Mount Moriah is here. This is where a number of things happen. I can tell you about those later, man. We won't get too long involved. And right over here, if you go back this way from Jezreel, that's Mount Gilboa, where Saul and Jonathan were killed. Okay? So That's where these events are taking place. So from Jezreel, Mount Moriah, and from here, view of Mount Gilboa. That's what it looks like.
How big is that place? For those of us who've not been really outside of this area.
Yeah.
How big, are we talking like miles, like here to, Austin, like how, it doesn't look that big.
It's not that big. Yeah, it's not. It's, and I'd have to look up the mileage again and that kind of thing. Lori knows because we traveled it, yeah. It's a couple hours drive, from Jerusalem up to this area. Maybe 2 hours, yeah.
There's somebody's map.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what that purple is there exactly of Israel.
Texas is about 33 times bigger than Israel.
So there's, basically the purple area is Israel kind of overlaid. A part of Texas, yeah. That's just, so here's San Antonio and here's Dallas.
Oh, from top to bottom.
From top to bottom.
And we're just a little valley there in the middle.
Well, we're down here somewhere.
This
Yes.
is just a little valley there.
Yeah.
There in the middle, correct.
Yeah.
That's just a part of Israel,
Like driving from one side.
not the whole thing.
Yeah, that is pretty much the border of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing fits between Dallas and San Antonio.
Wow.
Yeah.
About 250 miles.
Yeah.
But the valley, I mean, it looks like, at least the last picture of Mount, that one?
Yeah.
I mean, looks like, maybe not, you can kind of walk there in a day, or a few hours, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's
Like
just,
Montana.
Yeah.
In Montana where we live, you can see the Bighorn Mountains in the south. It looks sort of like that's 40 miles.
Yeah. It's bigger than, it's a good walk, but you through the Herod Valley, through that shaft, you could walk it in a day, yeah. So when you're talking about Gideon and his troops being right over here and the Midianites being there as massive as they were close, Yeah, they were very close. Okay? So, but let me show you this.
On a clear night, they could hear them yell.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if this will actually work for me. We'll see what happens. Okay. Maybe not. Oh. No, this is really sad.
The drone flyover.
What is it? Down at the bottom left there, you see those little,
Yeah, this is just, end, and there's a movie on there, and I could see it on mine at home. But this is this is Lori's picture of the Valley of Megiddo here, and it's worth seeing. So,
Is that highway there, Terry?
yeah, this is a highway. This is was taken in 2018.
That would have made it much easier to get across town.
Okay, so then we're going to do this then. And this should work. There we go.
This is the Valley of Megiddo. As you can see, it's a massive valley. It is the breadbasket of Israel. It was in this valley that Ahab and Jezebel had a fortified city and palace at Jezreel. Ahab has died, and his son Ahaziah is reigning. Ahaziah is looking out from Jezreel. This is actually the site of Jezreel. It's looking at the shaft of the arrow into the Herod Valley here, and looking this direction. As we move this direction, it would have been the direction from which Jehu came upon his chariot, and Ahaziah would have gone out to meet him in this very area right here, as you see. and he would have lost his life.
Yeah, that was a little bit erroneous because it was Jehoram that went out, and Ahaziah from Israel went out with him. So both of them were killed by Jehu. So, but that's it. You know, I mean, that's what the land looks like, and that was taken with Lori and I this past trip. Where do I get out of here? There we go. Come on.
It's the big one, the one in the screen, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're good here. So that's what should have played on my PowerPoint, but didn't. So anyway, questions on that? Yeah, I mean, to me, these studies of these kings are just fascinating. The life in Israel, the things that were taking place, and things that are recorded there. There's just a lot of things for us to learn from them. But it's really been helpful to the studies at Jerusalem University, American Institute of Holy Land Studies, where you're taught not only the history but the geography of the land. It really adds to your visual of the Bible, and even though it's modern days, and Jezreel, of course, was a huge fortified city, and you know, with palace, and of course that's where Jezebel, where they came to Jezebel, and they said, throw her down from the tower, and they threw her down, and the dogs ate her. And that was Jezreel. That's where Lori and I were. That's where we stood, and she took video of the place where these events took place. Right there outside of Jezreel, this area that you looked at was the place, it was in this area where Naboth's vineyard was, and Ahab wanted it. And he coveted it, and he took it, and Jezebel took it for him, and they killed Naboth, and so wrath and justice was brought upon Ahab and his family, and on Jezebel. So it was there in Jezreel, you know, not in Samaria, not in the capital city, where Jezebel was probably attending to Jehoram, and she was thrown out of the tower and killed. So, questions or comments? These very uplifting things from the